So our next segment is going to focus on communications from a crisis and an emergent perspective. As I started out the session talking about today, the tragedy in Georgia only kind of reinforces the fact that in a blink of an eye, it's a normal day until it isn't. So we put together a panel of professionals, including our own COPA Health, Norm Duvet. We've got Holly Morgan, we've got Chief Forrest Smith, and you're going to have to self-introduce yourself one more time.
All right, Public Information Officer.
1 second.
Public Information Officer Marisa Ramirez Ramos with Mesa Fire and Medical.
We wanted to demonstrate a little bit of flexibility, and I wanted to put the PIO on the spot because she gets that microphone shoved in her face just like you used to back in the day. You were shoving the microphone into people's faces. But when I met Marissa today and saw that she was here, I said, we've got 4 chairs. Let's put you on the panel as well. Going back to some serious stuff, the incidents in Georgia yesterday. I don't know what your perspective was. I don't know if you had the opportunity to follow it, but one of the things that I noticed beyond the tragedy itself was the person that was one of the primary communicators. There was a person from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation talking about the incident itself. But then there was also the sheriff from that community who's similar from that Connecticut police captain in Sandy Hook several years ago, in my opinion, portrayed a level of confidence and information where, in my opinion, he was releasing the right information. And Norm, you and I had a discussion before we started today as I hand this over to you, that it's not about speed, it's not about placating the media, it's about getting it right.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the things that we all hear these days is miscommunication, disinformation, intentional disinformation, and people not really knowing what's real and what's not real. And when you add into it an emergent situation, it really becomes something that's more concerning because so many people, 9/11 is an example. I remember the morning of 9/11. Obviously, I think most of us who were alive at that time remember where we were and what we were doing. But one of the things I remember is people insinuating on the news or saying on the news that there might be other attacks, and they're looking at Chicago. And my sister was in the 67th floor of a high rise in Chicago. So I got nervous. I got really worried about that. And we didn't know Osama bin Laden. We didn't know anything then. But even in small situations, about 15 years ago, I was driving home, gonna have a dinner with my wife and a group of friends, and I got a flat tire. So I called and I said, listen, I got a flat tire, I'll be home in a little bit. I got a call the next day from a friend of mine, says, I heard you were in a serious accident. And I thought, okay, this is the telephone game on adult level. So I really became a little bit passionate about trying to make sure that I understood the stress that the media is under when they're trying to talk about an emergent situation, and Stan gave a good example. The stress that our public officials are under, and the stress that emergency responders are under when there's an emergent situation. Everybody wants to know what's going on, but nobody wants to be patient enough to make sure that they get it right. And that's why we have this panel today. That's one of the biggest concerns that I have, and that's why I'm so glad that Holly, Forrest, and Marissa are here. When I first started this conference many, many years ago, I was focused on the incident command-based system. I don't know how many of you know that, but there's always, in addition to people leading the situation, there's always public information officers. So I just want to pass it over to Holly because you have a pretty decent perspective on how the media deal with situations.
Hello? Okay. Oh, yes, but Forrest, I think you're going to go first, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. We'll reverse engineer this. Good morning, everybody. So this is kind of a work, and this is how we do it in the field, right?
Yeah, so tomorrow in the news, Forrest, it's going to be major gaffe by Norm Duvet causes problem at emergency preparedness conference.
Well, first of all, before we go into that part, if I can give it a show of hands, who here represents some of your leadership within your organization? Okay. Who here then, when we look at some of our skilled nursing facilities and such, who's out there on the floor? Who's hands-on? Anybody here? Okay, we've got some hands-on folks and folks who set policy. I do want to do this, and I'd like to take this moment to have you go back home and tell your colleagues, thank you. Thank you very much for the work you all do, because I got to tell you, if you all aren't out there engaged in taking care of our loved ones and giving us that confidence that you have plans in place, that our loved ones are in good hands, in your good hands, and that you're looking out for their safety and welfare, that means a lot to us. So that's a big deal. So thank you for that. And then, thank you. Thank you, sir. And then also, from a first responder standpoint, it means a lot to us knowing that there is a sense of accountability, planning taking place, because when we show up on the scene and we're managing an incident, our number one priority is life safety. See, we have a list of priorities that break out: life safety, property conservation, and then, of course, taking care of what's around that. But that life safety part is a big deal for us. Until we have that set, the incident is highly stressful, of course, but in an organized manner where our incident command is out there taking care of those parts. So as we talk about that incident command part, there's the operation and the incident itself, but then there's the communication side. There's the, oh no, something's going on at that incident or at that location. News media is coming out. And, you talked about 9/11. One thing that we didn't have back then is what? Social media, right? We didn't have social media back then. And so right now it's especially important that we slow down and gather information, because we know misinformation tends to just build on itself out there on social media. So, and I'm not going to go too long here, but just as you bounce this over, really that's one of the things we're taking care of. We're making sure that we have the incident being managed. The incident being managed. First of all, I'm going to show that video here in a second. Let's just go back. But we want to make sure that the incident and the situation's being mitigated, the emergency being mitigated, but at the same time, myself and Marisa are on the scene making sure we're gathering that information to get out to some of your former colleagues. And so that's really what we're going to start getting into. And we'll talk a little bit more about that part and how that plays itself out. And I guess if we just did a brief overview, again, we talked about planning already. We get there, we gather information. If you already have a relationship with us, that's great, because then we know who we can talk to get more insight. We can get an idea of how many people may be inside, start working with getting accountability. That's where you start working with our incident command to know who's been accounted for and who has not, and then what the messaging looks like. And as PIOs, we're not there to be your spokespeople, but we're there to pretty much put that information out on what's going on with the incident. But it's helpful knowing when you have plans in place where we can also give those viewers and those folks following us on social media the confidence that the situation's managed and that they're at a location that has already thought about these things and it's already taken care of its customers and clients. So with that, I'm done. Yeah, thank you. The Mesa Fire Medical Department recognizes you for your safe and effective evacuation plans and for. I lied to you. I said I was done, and then you hear my voice up here. We're gonna hit pause on this because what I wanted to show you is just something that when we talk about emergency management and how do you engage with your local fire department, there's ways that you can do that. And a gentleman had mentioned earlier here about how there's free things. There's free services available. And these are the collaborations that you have with your fire departments that you can reach out. And if I may, I'm going to show this video real quick because this is an example of things that we do in Mesa to be able to engage you and your colleagues in creating a safe environment for your clients. Oh, now it's not going to play. The Mesa Fire Medical Department recognizes you for your safe and effective evacuation plans and for effectively applying them on the dates of February 6th and March 20th, 2017.
We do fire drills monthly. We do our evacuation drills 2 a year. And ironically, we had just done a total evacuation of the building on the 23rd of January before we had our first incident. There was no injuries, and that was the blessing.
With our presentation today, what we do is we show we're true partners with the Mesa community, and in this case with this complex, who have followed fire code, followed suggestions, and although they had an unfortunate incident here, they had a very good outcome as a direct result of their training, emergency evacuation.
It's important to understand that we impress on people that what they need to do is have a plan of action. Not only that, but they need to practice it. Because in the event of a fire or an emergency, what happens is typically panic sets in. And sometimes people forget things. When we go even to residential homes, we tell people, we show them how to do an escape plan from the home, just like the evacuation plan that prevention suggests that they do here.
That was a true pleasure to accept that certificate. I could not do this without the assistance of the Mesa Fire Department, and they're encouraging to give us training, more knowledge, and it makes me very proud of the staff members that's here, and reinforces in my heart what a great team we are, along with the fire department personnel.
That's our example of collaboration right there. Again, that you can do with your local fire department. Holly?
Yes, okay. My name is Holly. Like Norm had said, I was in TV news for about 15 years, locally and nationally, before turning over to the dark side of public relations. I have the honor of working with Norm and Jeff on a regular basis for COPA, for some special projects. But what I'm here today is just kind of do a quick breeze through of crisis communication during an emergency situation. In the video that we just saw, they obviously have their stuff together, and they would probably be very familiar with what we're going to go over today. But these are just kind of baby steps of getting a team in place, some ideas if you are ever in a crisis situation, on making sure that the information that you send out is accurate and that the news can use it. So first, we have can you hit the slides for me? Would you mind? Oh yeah, great. Let's go to the next slide then. So first, you need to identify potential emergency scenarios. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. So think of crisis simulations as a fire drill, just kind of what we saw in that last video, but for everything that could go wrong. I'm gonna leave this a little blanketed so that you can kind of plug in your own industry. But you wanna find those potential emergencies and identify them before they happen. Some of those categories could include natural disasters, technological failures. We're talking about cybersecurity today, human-caused incidents. Yesterday, there was national news on the shooting, or a health-related crisis. So really, you want to kind of categorize those different emergencies with your team first. That's a good place to start. Brainstorming is always a wonderful idea, and it doesn't just have to be the head of the company or your top people. Get your staff involved. They might know more about what's going on behind the scenes and things that could potentially go wrong. So use those brainstorming sessions to identify those specific scenarios, and then consider both common emergencies like we just saw, and then those that are unique to your business. And really, you want to make sure that you have those very clearly identified. Now, with that information, you would want to essentially create a crisis playbook, if you will, and that's going to outline your potential risks and specific responses. I love this. So if you're a pet store during a power outage, the crisis playbook would include steps like moving tropical fish to a backup generator tank, because no one wants sushi in a pet shop. But really just thinking about those little things where, if you don't have a backup generator for something, how much food is going to be spoiled? How much of a monetary loss would that be for your company? So those little tiny things you really have to think about as well. The other thing with your playbook that you create, you have to keep up on it. So I loved that they had, Oh, we can go back. Let's go back one more. Oh yeah, maybe you were going backwards. Go the other way. So that's the end of the slide.
Wish I could go backwards.
There we go. So next slide.
All right. There?
Yes, this is perfect. Okay. Yes, sorry. You're like, what's going on? Okay, so you want to assemble your crisis response team as well. So once you do the brainstorming and you figure out the problems that need to be addressed potentially, you always want to have a point of contact. Make sure that they're comfortable speaking on camera, that they are comfortable in emergency situations and under pressure. Make sure that they have some sort of media training, especially under pressure, I think, in these instances, because if you're on live television and you mess something up, it can become a little messy. So have your point person who is great under pressure. We've come a long way with AI. I know a lot of people might be resistant. I mean, people are on different sides. But there are some really great tools with artificial intelligence that allow you to monitor your company's name. So let's say you do have an emergency situation or a crisis and you want to know what information is being put out about your company. There are AI tools and listening systems through social media tools that can actually tell you what kind of information is being spread or said about your company. One that we use specifically is called Critical Mention, and it will pick up your company across the nation on radio, TV, e-versions of magazines, and any TV stations. So let's say you have your team assembled and your crisis is happening, right? The best thing that I would recommend, especially with having experience in the media, getting your message to the media and getting the information out there without having to go on camera, the best thing would be to craft your statement and issue it on your own. A great way to do that would be via video. And what news can essentially do is, let's say something's going on and you put it out on your social media channels and you have a statement that's a video. News is a visual medium. They will easily be able to translate that into what we call a VOSOT or a soundbite on air. Then you have coverage immediately. It's kind of handled while you work behind the scenes. I would say within 30 minutes of an emergency happening, you would want to issue a statement to keep the chatter and the misinformation from spreading. We talked a little bit about social media. 9/11, social media wasn't around. Can you imagine? Right now, it's huge, and it should be the forward part of your communication system. And especially in an emergency situation, you want to make sure that your social media tools are on lockdown so that you can control the storyline. It's your crisis hotline. So you definitely can, I mean, there's some tips in here where you can add company hashtags and hashtag your crisis situation, and then the news can flow that way. The other thing is, if you have a social media team, which you should, and maybe a standby person who's kind of your spokesperson on the TV side, and then somebody on social media who can mitigate the conversation via social or on Twitter, who can answer concerned tweets or things like that from your verified social media handle. In addition to giving a video statement, holding a video conference is totally cool these days as well, on your terms. And what I mean is you can do a Facebook Live. You can obviously go live on Instagram. You can do your own video conference without having the media there. And again, this is just a little tip of how that information can then be utilized by the news without you having to deal with them. Okay, another really great idea, and it depends on how large your company is, but we have seen this in many situations where bigger corporate companies and even smaller ones have like even a landing page for an emergency situation. So the best way to get information out to the public is maybe you have this landing page already created with these channels that say breaking news, now update, where you are funneling the information out through your website and directing the news to go to your social media channels, to your microsite, we call it, and to those other outlets that you are providing information. Again, this is to consolidate the information that is being released to keep misinformation from spreading. So that's another idea that a lot of companies will do and just have on the back burner. You pull up your microsite when an emergency situation happens, you're posting your press release, your video conference, and your video statement. Just to give you a little insight as well for what news is looking for as far as covering a story, and especially in an emergency situation. And I'm telling you this so that when you're crafting your emergency plan, you have this in mind as far as kind of delivering to news their story on a silver platter, if you will. That just keeps them from asking questions that might put you in a vulnerable situation or where you feel uncomfortable. So they're obviously looking for timeliness and human interest, visual appeal, which is why the video statements are important, because news can't really do much with a press release, and the TV is going to be your best medium for getting information out. Obviously, credibility, you have your point person, the local angle, you'll definitely want to give the human interest side as well. So with that, once you give your initial statements and you have things handled, give continuous updates and be transparent. So you can even, if there were a mistake and something happened, address it. Make sure that you're not addressing something. Be transparent, because people know that it happened. So do your best to be transparent in those situations. Once everything is handled, the best thing would be, still do updates, give updates on your social media. I would keep your microsite up for at least a week or two with updates if people are directed to go to that. And then internally, make sure that you go over what worked, what didn't, and you're constantly tweaking that plan, because it'll never be perfect, but you can always become more and more prepared. And that's it.
That's wonderful. It is wonderful. But I got to tell you something. When we're talking about preparing, and I was having a conversation, I can't remember who it was with earlier, you're never going to be able to figure out all the things that could happen, every single incident. One time in my life, and I'm old now, one time in my life I heard of a situation where people actually practiced for something that happened exactly the way they practiced. I don't know if any of you remember, but back in the 80s, I believe it was, there was a plane crash in Sioux City, Iowa. And that emergency preparedness department, the fire and police and EMTs and everything, they actually practiced for that type of scenario like 6 months before it came out. And then when it happened, they were all set. But it's muscle memory. You are practicing for emergent situations. It could be one thing and the reaction will translate to the next. And I have to tell you, I've known Forrest for a while, but when I first became aware of Forrest, because he was the public information officer and he was on the news. And I thought, wow, listen to that silky voice and smooth, and he's getting this message across. But he had credibility. And now Marissa is the PIO officer. So Marissa, tell me, what are some of the challenges that you have to deal with when you come up on a fire or an accident or some other situation where you have to get messages, information, and then get it out to the community?
Sure. There's a lot of sources or information that's coming in, so weeding through that information and really discovering what is the truth or what is actually happened, because everybody's going to have their version of perspective and lens, how it happened to them. So really knowing who is the point person or the best source to give you the accurate information that needs to be put out, and then simplifying the message that goes out so that the public can understand. Every organization has their own jargon or acronyms or way that you talk. Government, fire department, the media. So putting it in a way that originally you're going to write it how you would internally communicate with your organization, but then realizing that this is a message for the public. So how is the public going to receive this message? How do you need to word things so that they will best understand? There was so many nuggets of information in your presentation. I was thinking of all these things as you were going along. But being able to put it out in a way that's the most easy to consume for the public, I agree. Video goes a really long way. Nowadays, even the media won't always have the resources maybe to come to a scene. And I can be in my office and or even at the scene, and they'll say, can we just send you a Zoom link, and can you jump on Zoom, and can you just do a Zoom interview with us? So they might not even physically be at the location, but they're still able to get the information that they need. And I think that information is twofold, especially for what we're talking about here, is giving the facts of the incident as it's occurring, but then there's the message that needs to go not just to the general public, but the people that are most effective. So the family and friends and loved ones of someone that might be in your facility. So there could be separate messaging that here's what's happening, the general information, but what do these people need to know about how to get to their loved one, check if their loved one is safe. So there's another set of messaging that has to go. So remember who is the various audiences that you need to communicate to. But I think the biggest thing, and because part of the area that I oversee is education. So all of this really starts way back there and doing the education. You know, we are here, like Forrest said, is to be a resource to the community. So if you need a resource and if you need help as you're planning this and going along, we do tabletop exercises all the time to plan and go through various situations. So use your local department as a resource. We have educators that can come out and talk, as simple as something like the video that was shown, fire drills and how to escape and escape planning. But we have those resources, so we can work with you.
Forrest, let me ask you a question. I've already established by my remarks that I was affected by the PIO, the sheriff, in the incident yesterday. And you just talked about the facts. But is there a time, especially considering organizations like COPA and our long-term care providers, they are a caring and compassionate workforce. Is there a time for compassion? I mean, just the other day, 4 people killed in a fire in Tempe. Do they expect the PIO or any organization represented here today, are you just a robot in front of the camera, just given the facts and the facts only? Or is there a time for compassion, or sometime do we need to reel that back in?
Stan, that's a great question because, you know, to your point, the idea of media relations, and this is something that plays out for you all as well, is to also acknowledge that something happened, and it's a traumatic thing for not only your organization or for those in the community. It is the community it's impacted. When we have a loss of life as a result of fire, drowning, shootings, any of that, that's a big deal. And I have a really good friend who was a former PIO for Tempe PD, and he exhibited a little bit of emotion, but in a way that was very professional and genuine. And that's the thing, is that and I know, Mark, you do the same thing, right? Where there is compassion when we're speaking to the public, there is a sense of that because this is our community as well. And so we're not ones who are just sort of the outsider there, and that's the same thing with news media as well, because journalists are also part of this same community. They have a job to do. And the thing that I talk about a lot is that the relationship that we have has to be strong with our media partners, because those are the folks who are helping us disseminate accurate information and getting it out there. So going back to what you're asking, Stan, yes, there is a level of that we acknowledge these situations that happen in our community. We show it with compassion and with care. And then we try to give information that's respectful to the organization, but also the families. And then to wrap it up, this goes way back because you may be saying, okay, well, how does this affect us? When before that happens, how does social media impact us? And that's the part where you want to be engaged, because if you do have an incident happen, you want to have a place where maybe family members and your stakeholders can go to get accurate information. And it may not be you just posting original content. It may be reposting what Medisa posts on Mesa Fire's page. And that way, if you have that presence, now your clients and your stakeholders can all go to a place to find out what the real deal is. Because they may say, wait a minute, ABC or somebody said something. But then now if you're the place where you're going, check it out, the media will actually go there as well and repost that, and you become a source for accurate information to get out.
When you're talking about that, I'm thinking back through my time here in Arizona, and I moved here 26 years ago this past July. And one of the first people I met maybe 25 plus years ago was Gil Damiani. And Gil's been part of this conference for many years, and he's a great friend. But at the time, he was with the Mesa Fire Department, and he's subsequently he was with Homeland Security, I believe, and he's done so many other things. But meeting him and making the effort to meet him is why I start to feel comfortable in a lot of situations. When you're baking cookies, when you're getting them together, is not the time to find out you ran out of sugar. The cookies will not turn out good, right, Janie? Yeah, so you need sugar. My point is this: the time to get to know these individuals are now, and you might not ever need them, and that would be great. But to get to know them now, so that if you need them, if you need to understand what they're doing a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you've built those relationships. The relationship I have with Stan. Stan's been working with us for many years too, and sometimes he'll be halfway across the country, text me and say, hey, did you see this in the news? And it's all about situations that could be applicable to our situation. And knowing the steps, knowing the people, knowing the folks that you can trust in these situations, it doesn't come from just turning on the news or flipping on the computer.
And what a better way to build confidence in your stakeholders, right? If I have loved ones who are in your care, to then know that if I went to social accounts, that you're demonstrating things that you're doing with the fire department, the police departments, and some of the other stakeholders and some of those other folks out there, because then now you're also giving that confidence back to those end users and their families that look at some of the things that are happening. And that way, when something happens, the first thing we don't think, and we've heard this in other situations, like, oh yeah, I saw that coming. You want to be proactive there, where you're out there posting things that show that you're doing these exercises. I'd bring Holly on board and say, listen, we want to come up with a plan, and we want to have a social engagement side where we're out there posting things, showing that we're doing exit drills and that we're doing emergency planning. And then that way people see it and they know that, okay, that's a safe place for my loved one.
I was just going to say the part where we said, what is news looking for? So ahead of time, too, that would be a great human interest story. It's just figuring out the best way to package it to TV, but that is a good point.
So I got a question for you, Holly. Why is no comment the poison pill, or it's going to get you in some kind of trouble? I remember years ago, one of my clients, an assisted living facility in Mesa, 54th Street, I don't think they're there anymore. They had a fire, sprinkler discharge, everything was okay, but the response from the executive director was no comment, and the way that the media portrayed it, it was like the facility refused to provide any information. So how do we address the no comment issue?
Yeah, that's actually something that we do in our media trainings as well. The no comment is very old-fashioned. We don't like that anymore. I suggest to, if you're ever uncomfortable in an interview, or if they ask a question that you're not comfortable answering, we always defer and say, let me get back to you on that. Or I gotta check on that statistic, or I need to pull some more information on that, let me get back. They can try to reframe the question and you can say it again, but that protects you, and it also isn't as harsh as no comment, because I think when you say no comment, you're kind of insinuating that there's some trouble there. And so by saying, let me get back to you, you can eventually get back to them, but it just saves you from having to answer the question. And people do it all the time.
The pitch that I would make today, is to keep attending events like this, but also connect with people at events like this. We're able to connect you with anybody here in the room, and if you've heard something today and you want to set up a meeting with them, call them, get out there, think of scenarios. You're never going to think of all the scenarios, believe me, I've tried. And I've got a lot more people in this room that are smarter than me, but reach out to them, walk up to them, introduce yourself, give them a card, say, I want to talk to you. Take the advice of the first panel that was up here. Take the advice of Marissa and reach out, and whether it's Mesa, Scottsdale, Tempe, Glendale, get to know these individuals, because whether or not you never need them, which would be great if you never needed them, you're still going to be aware of people in the community that when you hear something on the news, you're going to have a little bit greater level of trust because you know who these people are. I'm so excited to see so many people here. I have to tell you, when we first did the first one, it was like 23 people around, a big table in a conference room. I thought that was wonderful. But now I know that as a community that's caring about emergent situations, getting the answers from the people that we know it's always preferable to getting them from people we don't know. So.
Well, I was just going to say, I know we had craziness with the slides, but I did make sure that you all will get a copy of this. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out. Or if you ever want us to review one of your plans, we're happy to do that. But you will get a copy of all of this as well.
Forrest, I just want you to say something in that silky voice of yours. I don't get to hear him much anymore because he's not in front of the camera that much. I get to see Marissa, and I love seeing Marissa. But any final parting words?
I would say not to be. Excuse me. Oh, I didn't need the mic already. I'd say not to be shy about reaching out to your police department, your fire department, and getting assistance and partnering there, because on our end, we're trying to look at ways where we can perhaps decrease calls for service for fall injury prevention. So maybe there's something we can work with you on that, as well as the day-to-day. And then when it comes to the big picture, that's when you saw in that was our Assistant Fire Marshal, Kevin Bush, where I've got, and all of the communities that are represented here between Scottsdale, Peoria, and wherever community you're in, does have those resources by way of their fire marshal's office and fire prevention to come out and do assessments. And again, it's free. And these are things that you do where it serves all of us to have you on board with that, and as well as our emergency managers.
And before I throw it down to Marissa, I also wanted to say, you can expand that circle. I'm thinking about our information technology department at Copa Health. Todd Godomsky, I think, is here, Dan Hickson. When I hear about something that has to do with technology, they're the first people I reach out to. I ask them, is this real? Is it true? And sometimes they immediately are able to say, nah, it's not real. Sometimes they're like, yeah, that is real. But other times they say to us simply, we're going to check into that. Get to know your government officials, get to know your city council people, get to know the people who run the airports, people that are at the hospitals, and make sure that you're familiar, at least enough that you can call them up and say, this is happening, who can I talk to get an expert opinion? Marissa, I know you have to do that all the time, and that's your job, but what kind of emphasis would you place on building a network?
It's all in the pre-planning. I'm sure that you're going to hear this over and over again today, but I would say all the work you do on the front end is what's going to help you when something does happen to execute it flawlessly. There's still situations. Forrest and I have been a team for years with public information in the department, and there's still situations that come up. And just like you said, I'm looking at a reporter going, that is a really good question. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm going to find out, and I'll circle back with you on that. So same thing. Keep an awareness in the media, in situations that are happening, as you've heard here already. I always look at those, and if there's something that happens with another department valley-wide, I'm like, what would I do in that situation? That hasn't happened to me in this role yet, but if that happened, how would I react? What would I be doing? Do I already have speaking points that go along with that? Who are people that I need to talk to get information that would be applicable to that particular situation? So all the planning you do ahead of time and all those plans like we're talking about that are sitting on the shelf. But when you do need to reach for those and bring them out, you are going to be ready because you put the time in ahead of time.
So Stan, I know we got like 3 or 4 minutes. Does anybody have any questions for Holly or for, yes?
I had a question about how you report news without violating client trust or violating HIPAA.
Why don't you repeat the question?
I had a question about how you report incidents without violating client trust or violating HIPAA regulations.
That would be something that I would definitely, in the pre-planning, make sure that we would line out in your media training. It would need to be specific to those said guidelines, so we would really need to look into that and then have maybe some generic statements, but then also with what you just learned, if it's a very tight situation, maybe it's you putting out the information and not taking interviews to make sure that you don't stumble or mess that up if you're really concerned about something like that.
I noticed yesterday as well, the sheriff said, I'm not going to be taking any questions, but the media still came at him hard. They kept asking questions, and he almost got fished in a little bit. And how do you resist that, Forrest?
I tell you, yeah, because there's some red meat everybody wants, right? They're just kind of getting after it. But I tell you, that's an opportunity, because I think to your point there, when you hear the fireside, what Melissa and I have done is we're just kind of giving the general number of people, right? We're not going to go into the detail of saying that who it was. We're going into, you may have 3 individuals who were displaced or injured, is really broad. And 9 times out of 10, we're never even telling the media the location. They find it out themselves because they're listening to calls and their scanners at the assignment desk. And so what they happen to hear is police and fire calls. They head out to the scene. They get a pretty good read on the initial information, but they don't know the details. And that's not for us to give any details on your clients. We just talk about the general thing of here's what happened and everything. And we keep it at that higher level.
Yeah, but everybody has to understand, especially when you're working for an organization, nonprofit, healthcare, any organization, even one as large as Copa Health, just because they're not going to say people's names doesn't mean people won't jump to conclusions. If the message is out there, you have to be able to have a system to reach out to family members, to loved ones, to people care, so that they're not frantic thinking that their son, daughter, aunt, uncle, brother, sister were one of the people that were affected by an emergent situation. So it's not just, I know we're talking about media in emergent situations, but it's not just that. You have to have backup, because you will have people calling you, flooding your phone lines.
Right. But here's that opportunity that I was talking about too, is that when you've already had something in place, a plan, these are the time where you get to throw out some of that you feed media information. I might not be able to tell you who it was, but I could tell you here's things that we do to protect our clients and the residents. So what you do is you may not be giving them exactly what we want, but we've watched political debates. I might not answer the question. I'm going to tell you what I want you to know, right? You can ask me what my age is, and I'm going to start talking about the weather. You have an opportunity to then talk about other talking points. There's going to educate that journalist and the public about other things. So you get what I'm saying? It's kind of tying it back to what are the things that we want them to know. We can't answer that right now, but we got to tell you this. And it's that redirect to the positive things that you already have in place that gives insights that we've got this, we're prepared, and you can have confidence in our staff.
And I think that goes on top too. Just make sure your spokesperson is very well spoken. They know the company in and out. Where that's just kind of ingrained in their blood. Where you don't have to worry about them misstepping for HIPAA and things like that. Don't let the intern out.
There's usually the last question that any reporter will ask you, and they'll say, "Do you have anything else to add?" Yeah. That person needs to know if that's the time to go, "No, I don't," and stop right there. Or, like Forrest said, have that stuff you can pull out of your back pocket and go, yeah, I want to add that they're a great community partner. We've been working them. For a year, we've developed a relationship. We've been out here 5 times already. We've done pre-planning with it. It's all that stuff that they can be talking about and putting in place to show how prepared you are.
Let's hear it for our master communicators.